up, everyone? Tyler DeLuca here, back with my top takeaways from this past week in the WNBA. And this week was an interesting one. We have gotten to the point now where we're about 10 games in, 10 games plus for most teams in this league, and we have a sample size now. And we're obviously there's only 40 games in a season, so we are a quarter of the way at least through every team's season. And so now I think we can kind of start to draw some conclusions about where some of these teams are. But there are some very big question marks across the league right now, and no team more. And I can't believe if you told me preseason that I would be saying this right now, I thought you were crazy. No team more right now than the Las Vegas Aces, who are sitting at 5-5, the first 3-game losing streak since Becky Hammon became coach of this team. Obviously, there's a major piece missing in Chelsea Gray, who is listed as questionable now for the first time this season and for the next game. But it's off, and it very well could just be Chelsea Gray just comes in and fixes this. I mean, she is that talented. She's the point guard for a reason. Like, it can very well be that simple. But it's very different. And I frankly, with the rest of the talent on this team, with Asia Wilson playing like the best player in the world, she is the best player in the world, and she's taking it up even another level this season. I wouldn't have expected to be 5-5 here. Kelsey Plum has had her struggles on the court, and just it's been a couple off nights for Kelsey throughout this early season. Jackie Young has been in and out with an illness and trying to play through it. So there's definitely been different factors here on top of just Chelsea Gray being out, which is a major factor in its own right. So I'm not pressing any big red buttons. But obviously, I mean, the Aces are sitting in 7th place right now. That's just not what you would anticipate from this team. And frankly, I with the level that Asia Wilson is playing at, the fact they haven't been able to swing some of these games to wins is worrisome. So it might really just be, like I said, as simple as bringing Chelsea Gray back and getting her back on the court after suffering that injury in the WNBA finals last season. And it really might just be that simple. You bring Chelsea Gray back and everything smooths over. But that's something that we're going to need to see. That's something, because right now it's not adding up. And what's interesting is, like, when you look at the standings, they still have a positive point differential as compared to Phoenix and Atlanta in 5th and 6th, who are in negatives. So obviously the Aces are still a very good team. Like, I don't think they're going to be here by the end of the season. I'm not pressing any big red panic buttons, but you have to acknowledge the fact that this has been a disappointing start. And for a team that is trying to be a dynasty. We're talking going for their 3rd ring in a row, the 3-peat. To have a 3-game losing streak this early on in the season was just not what was anticipated. So I'll be interested in seeing when Chelsea Gray does officially come back, what this all looks like. And if once everyone gets in their groove a little bit, because I just feel like outside of Asia, there really hasn't been that groove consistently found across the board, across this roster. Asia is playing, like I said, like the best player in the world. She is clearly in a tier of her own this season. But right now, the team isn't matching that level, isn't matching that caliber. So once everyone can get rolling, assuming that they do, which I think that they will, I think that we'll get much closer to what we know the Aces to be. But until then, you can only talk about what you're seeing. And right now they're 5-5 and in 7th place. And that's just not the standard of the Aces right now. Another team that is close to them in the rankings, but a completely different spot franchise-wise, is the Chicago Sky, who have Camila Cardoso back officially. She's been in the starting lineup with Elizabeth Williams going down with an injury. I think it was a pretty common take across the board when the Chicago Sky drafted Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso that these are two very good talents. But figuring out exactly how they're going to work together on the court with just the spacing and what they both are very, very good at, there were question marks. Myself included, there were question marks. But the early returns on this duo have been very, very encouraging. I've been loving what I'm seeing. They dominate the rebounding, which is like kind of what we anticipated. But the flow of everything feels very solid. We've seen a lot of high-low play between the two. I mean, everyone's getting used to Camilla still being in there because, you know, when you have a player of that height, if there's an adjustment period. They just haven't had that yet. So just when it comes to post-entry passes and things of that nature, there's absolutely an adjustment period that comes with that. But Camilla is one of those players that, and I think Cameron Brink is another rookie that kind of has this trait, that when she's on the court, there's a shift. And what I mean by that is, even if it's just for that half second, people are second guessing going into the paint, going to challenge Camilla. And that is such a big asset to have on the defensive end, like insanely good asset. So I have just been very impressed early on with the returns from this Chicago Sky team. And especially that duo. And I frankly thought that it might take a little bit of time. I thought that they could figure it out and would figure it out. I didn't know if it would be an instant kind of clicking, which it seems like we have. And for that, I can't overstate how impressive it is what Teresa Weatherspoon has been able to do with this team so early on, because James Wade left this franchise terribly. No draft picks, no salary cap. The fact that it feels like there is direction to this team is such a massive improvement. I thought they nailed the draft, but ultimately, like, they still had so much to do and so much buy-in, and it feels like it's been immediate with this team and with Teresa Weatherspoon. So I am just really impressed with Chicago across the board. Even though they're 4-7, they're still technically in the playoffs right now. They're in that final spot, that ace slot. Because frankly, after the aces in that 7, there's a drop off. And I think that the 8th spot is in a completely different tier than the 7th spot. Whoever ends up there, whether it be Atlanta, whether it be Phoenix, whoever, Las Vegas, whoever that might be, just looking at who's around it right now. I definitely think that there's a tier above that there's a jump between the 8th to the 7th spot. Where in the middle ground of the playoff seeding is going to be very, very tight. But the fact that the Chicago Sky are even there right now is so major compared to where it felt like they were as a franchise going into this season. So I've just been impressed across the board with the Chicago team. Obviously my expectations for a Chicago team and me being impressed with them are very different than a Las Vegas team, like we just talked about. But for the expectations I had for the Chicago team, it feels like Teresa Weatherspoon is the coach for the job. I've talked about it. It just, the fit of everything just makes so much sense across the board with this roster, with this city, with this coach, with this franchise. It all just adds up to me, and it feels like they have a home run hire here that is going to take Chicago Sky back to possibly winning championship. Like it feels like that is the level of culture being established here. And across the board when it comes to the teams in the bottom tier, whether it be Washington, Indiana, LA, it feels like as a whole with the franchise, I think each of those teams have bright spots within it. But as a whole, no team seems to be in a better holistic direction. And it feels like the person in charge is going to be the person in charge to lead them into this next era that they are trying to enter into. No team is doing that better than Chicago right now. So I've been super impressed with them. The addition of Camilla has been seamless. Obviously, Elizabeth Williams was really, really solid to start this season, so that is definitely a detriment to this team. But when you're looking at it from that kind of future aspect, being able to get extended minutes now with Camilla and Angel in the starting lineup together, I think in the long run will be a benefit for Chicago, but obviously we don't want injuries with anybody. But I do think that is going to be a major plus. And now you're going to be able to increasingly see who works around them, because that's what I want to see from all these teams, whether it be LA, Indiana, Washington, Chicago. You have your foundational pieces across the board you have foundational pieces, whether it be Aaliyah Edwards in Washington, obviously Caitlin and Aaliyah Boston, in Indiana, Rakia and Brink in LA, and now Angel and Camilla here in Chicago. You have your foundational pieces. You need to figure out who on this roster right now is here to stick around with them and to build with them and to surround them with going forward as they grow into their careers. And it seems like Chicago has this figured out better than any franchise in the league right now. So I've been super impressed with them. But I want you guys to let me know, what have been your takeaways over this past week of the WNBA season? Like I said, we're over a quarter of the way for most of these teams now. So we have kind of gotten the sample size. So let me know what your biggest takeaways have been, whether it be from this past week or the entire season so far in its whole. I will see you next time.